HOTFOOT by Angela Davis Johnson, in honor of the children of folks who migrate, by Trelawney Michelle. Established by the artist activist Charmaine Minniefield in 2010, the New Freedom Project preserves Black narratives as an act of resistance against erasure. By reflecting on the wisdom of those who came before, the organization is igniting a new freedom movement. One avenue to making that happen is its brand new residency program, of which Angela was the first. Angela is the bomb diggity, Charmaine boasted. She's an artist activist like I am. Her art reflects history and ancestral memory. This whole residency is part of her nomadic creative process. That whole concept is called HOTFOOT. Charmaine insisted that I speak with Angela directly to get a better understanding of the HOTFOOT concept. I reached out, and her words challenged me to reach into my own nomadic ways and deeper in search of my mother and foremothers' respective and collective gardens. HOTFOOT, she explained, is a working definition of what it means to be the children of folks who migrate.
I always tell people I'm from a lot of spaces because my father was in the military, but I claim East Arkansas because that's where my family is from, and it's the last place my grandmother lived. And I had the good fortune of living back in Arkansas when I was 14 to be able to revitalize her garden. So I say that because it's so important to understand me as an artist, is that my work is rooted in ancestral veneration and carrying on family stories. So I'm always listening for ways of understanding how my family's life and Black folks impact the way I understand and walk through life.
Angela's voice is light as a feather, yet passionate like burning sage. Not even halfway through the conversation, I started craving a blanket around my shoulders and a mug of hot tea to properly cradle myself in her stories of joy, trauma, past and present movement, and creation.
So one of the things that I noticed about myself is I can't sit still. I'm always on the move. I'm interested in migration and the practice of being nomadic and in a space of less not nomadic but more migratory. And so with that practice, I wanted to understand where that came from. My great grandmother was a woman who was constantly on the move, and it said that she had I said that she had the hot foot because she was, at a time in her life, she accidentally and inadvertently signed away our family's land. A white man came and told her that we had oil on our land, and this is when she lived in Arkansas. And when she signed the papers, she and all her children were put out. And so after that, she left from there to Mississippi, to Florida, to Chicago, back to Mississippi. She was in a constant loop of migratory movements. And then it made me reflect on how I'm in a constant loop of migratory movement. So I'm here in Atlanta, but I claim Arkansas, but I'm always in New Orleans. And right now, I'm currently floating in Philadelphia with my partner. So it's like this movement that I'm wanting to recognize and understand the power of that. Also, to be able to understand how it may be informed by trauma. So it's like a tension that I'm trying to uncover through this body of work.
HOTFOOT brought to mind something Tina Hicks said during her quilting workshop at the Beach Institute in Savannah. Gathered around a table of 5 women, she shared that her father would tell her, "You so free till you fool. When you gonna quit wearing your clothes on your back?" So I wanted to know more about Angela's implication behind HOTFOOT and if she set out to redefine it. She agreed that it had a negative connotation when she was growing up.
Because it's like someone who can't sit still, just have it together. But if you reframe it as a point of, yes, it could be that, and I think it is that. And I think also there's an aspect of curiosity, dream making, world building, and the strength of movement. And I think about mental, emotional movement, how we cross over terrains of growth and things that we have to navigate as Black folks living on this landmass. we're able to do that. We do it through our music. I feel like that's a migration in a sense. And for me, it feels like a hot-footed behavior to be able to dance our way through something. I'm always interested in trauma release exercises, whether we're in church and we're catching the spirit, or we're in like secular spaces where you're twerking. These have been practices and ways of moving through the mundanity and the nature, the oppressive nature that this space can be. And so I'm tying that to hot-footedness.
She brought up the Great Migration, in which 6 million Black folks left the South and headed north and out west between 1916 through 1970. And I thought about Augusta Savage, a child of the Great Migration, who once said, "I was a leap year baby, and it seems to me that I've been leaping ever since." I also thought about Jacob Lawrence's famous series, The Great Migration, and I thought about Romare Bearden's recurring theme of African-American migration.
We're from people from the Great Migration, and I'm trying to parse through what it could look like and what it could mean, because symbolism is important to my work. It's also hot-footing. It doesn't stand alone. This is a part of a work that I'm doing with my collaborator and partner, Lucy Reed, who's from Philadelphia and whose grandparents were a part of the Great Migration as well. And we're doing this piece called Hold On, Devotions to Hot Foot Living, which is moving up and down the Eastern Seaboard, where we're connecting with family, friends, and community, and listening and carving out a Black queer methodology to understand how we've been able to not only survive, but ways that we're building worlds within the practices that have been passed down to us. And so that's what hot footing is a part of. It's in communication and conversation with our ancestors, with ourselves and our beings in the ways that we're moving out.
The more she talked, the more Zora Neale Hurston, who also joined the Great Migration, came to mind. I rarely speak on what the dead would have wanted, but Zora would have absolutely loved this body of work. Angela was born in Orlando, mere minutes from Zora's hometown of Eatonville. Like Angela, some of Zora's movements were out of necessity, but most were pleasure-based. Zora wasn't afraid to travel alone. Literally, considering her move to D.C. and Harlem and her trips to New Orleans, Haiti, Jamaica, and the Georgia and South Carolina Sea Islands, but also creatively, seeing as how so many of her peers criticized her intent on writing about Black people being Black people sans the white gaze. Zora was an OG hot-footed nomad who boldly claimed ownership of her freed self. As if I'd passed her a baton of my thoughts, Angela picked that thing up and took off, leaving dust tracks on the road.
I call Zora Neale Hurston the patron saint of hot-footedness because, like, the way that she was able to be in multiple spaces, not only physically but like mentally, to have the clarity to understand that there was so much power in our story, our folk tale, our vernacular. Oh my gosh, I love her. Last year I went to Port St. Lucie and I think it's Fort Pierce.
Yeah, where she's buried.
Where she's buried. And I was so honored just to see and walk where she walked. And I think the name of her car was like a Red Cherry or something. But like she would travel through Florida with like a Black woman or like alone. But that takes a certain fearlessness and a certain bravery and clarity of like your soul to be able to do that and go and gather the stories. And see, I was born in Orlando, Florida, which isn't far from Eatonville. So it feels like that's my kindred spirit. That's my kinfolk.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and so folding her narrative. So I have a piece that I worked on and during this residency where I'm reading her short stories called Spunk, and she's writing this story of this woman who is a washerwoman. And I've written just an excerpt of that story, and then I'm overlaying it with abstracted imagery. And it feels like such a mark-making prayer invocation to release myself from the bodies, because I'm a primarily figurative painter, but to be able to step into abstraction feels like I'm closer to that thing, that release from needing to be respectable or representing like aspects of us that can't be contained with just one glimpse. And so being able to do that during this time has really left an impression. I felt nervous doing it because I'm known for my bodies, and I was able to create that from that space as well. But there was something about these little works that I've been creating that it just feels like a light coming on or a switch, because it helps me to lean into the prayers that I need through the work.
While she talked, I scrolled through her older artwork online again. According to Art Pill, the self-taught artist incorporates body movement and sound alongside her vibrant narrative paintings, which consist of portraits created with paint, scrap paper, found objects, and fabric. Mesmerized by her paintings of Black women, elder and young, some in head wraps and others in locks frozen pigtails, none are smiling and only a few make eye contact with me. Each has facial features or body limbs that seem to be in movement themselves, enough so that I don't see an intended person, but rather my own people. In their faces and postures, I see my friends Nichelle, Lily, and Glenda. I see my Aunt Bessie and journalist/author Sarah M. Broom. A few brothers, too. Then there's Strange Dark Garden, which the Mint Gallery shared along with the announcement of Angela's upcoming open studio. In the best way possible, Strange Dark Garden is not at all like its predecessors, yet it still somehow is.
Yeah, just making me think about the work of planting seeds, being patient enough to watch them grow, and tending and not rushing, but always in a movement. And I think to me that's what I'm trying to understand more about hot-footedness, because it is an active space, it is movement, but then there's also this question of how does one remain rooted while in motion. And so with that question before me, it feels like it's in the garden. It is in the practice of being able to tend to one's spiritual soul garden while in movement, while traveling and being in multiple spaces. And so that's what the piece is that I shared with Mitt. I'm having an open studio, which feels more like a share of a work in progress and a invitation to be in conversation with these works.
Whenever you make room for the spirits to speak and you honor what you're told, resources will align for you to make it happen and take it to the next level. I wrote that in Remembering Women's History, Laura Gatson and Shimoda Donna Emanuel's story, because it is one of my core beliefs and even a mantra at times. Just as it stood true for me and for Laura and Shimoda, it stands just as tall for Angela, who says she'll always have one foot in Atlanta.
I knew coming, I wanted to merge my life practice, the ways of cooking, living, and being with more of a container to be able to practice making things in another way. So I needed a studio. So I reached out to Charmaine and I was like, I want to do a mini residency. Who do I reach out? And she was like, girl, bye, I got you. We're going to do it through the New Freedom Foundation, a New Freedom Project. And it was like to be able to conceptualize this and be able to see it come to life with our request feels like a practice of knowing and movement, and then also planting and growing. And so this manifested from a beautiful space of making one's request and then watching the work come to life. And then with Najee at Black Art in America, with the support and the ability to just show up, just it's so indicative to me of Black ways. Like we know how to We know how to move in community. We know how to think in a collective way. And the more we do that, the more, to me, we decolonize and we shed off things that aren't for our greatness and for our goodness. And so this, to me, this residency speaks to that. And even with Mint Gallery, for the space to be opened up through an artist opening her space for me to be able to be there in studio, it just kept growing.
Angela shared a quote that she meditates on that the spiritualist and people's oracle Dana Knuckles said during the pandemic.
Burden of survival is shared. It's a shared responsibility. And we are, in order to move life and to reshape our world, we have to do it collectively. It is a shared burden. It is not one to do individually. We need each other. And to me, that's what this residency is saying, and it's doing. It's saying that we need each other, and we can show up for one another. And it's been powerful.